So we're at I think this is this the 20th, Matt? The 20th edition of the Arkansas Sportswriters and Sportscasters Hall of Fame. This was started by the Conway Sports Club. Mike Harrison, who was a radio guy in Conway that I worked with back in the 70s when I was sports editor of the Log Cabin Democrat in Conway. He got this started. One sports writer, one sportscaster every year. The first two, Orville Henry and Paul Eels, and it just kind of went from there. I think a lot of y'all probably know this is the 19th year anniversary of Paul Eels' passing. Was in a car wreck on July 31st. I will always remember that date and remember where I was and the last time I saw Paul. So we always have to remember Paul at these events. And it just turns out it's July 31st. Brent Powers picked the date, and it hit me that was kind of a unique date for this to be on the anniversary of Paul's passing. I see a lot of familiar faces. There's some that aren't here that I wish. Nate Allen, who's one of our inductees, is in the hospital with pneumonia, so say your prayers for Nate. You know, he's been battling cancer for about the last 10 years, and it's not a good situation now with Nate. We all, he's one of our icons in this sports writing game. I think that the thing that we want to remember today is that there are a lot more to come in this organization. We're just doing 2 a year, and we've got, I'd say, 30 to 40 that already are on our list that they could be considered Hall of Famers. I want to take a minute to we've got a new award this year, the Mike Harrison Excellence, which I told you Mike started the organization. Every year we always think about what can we do to add to this list, and we thought let's honor some people that we have to have as sports writers and sportscasters, people behind the scenes. So that's the Mike Harrison Award, which we had a vote, and it was unanimous on our selection committee. We have some selection committee members here today. Matt Jones, who's going to speak later. Larry Foley, Rusty Turner. Did I miss somebody? Is that who we have? Let's see. Donna Lampkin-Stevens, who is head of the journalism department at UCA, is another one of our committee members. Who else am I leaving out, Matt? Steve Sullivan, KATV. I thought they were coming today, but this is the start of football. Everything is kind of full go. All right, I just wanted to welcome everybody and appreciate our sponsors. This is a little bit different than our monthly Hogs Illustrated Sports Club, and I thank Brent for including our organization on the list of and this is an appropriate home in the sponsorship of Hogs Illustrated, the Hogs Sports Network, WholeHogSports. All of those entities have really helped to promote this organization, and I thank Brent. About 4 years ago, I started explaining to him this organization and that it had lost its home when Mike Harrison died of COVID, and it just kind of fell off the radar for about 2 years. And before I could finish the first sentence, Brent says, "We want to do that." And I said, "Well, I haven't finished and told you what the expense is yet." And he goes, "Well, we're going to do it." So now we're going to continue with the program. Matt Jones, will you take this microphone and let me sit back down? Okay, so one of the major problems that I viewed 5 years ago when we kind of resurrected this was that it was really the people that covered the Razorbacks, people from Little Rock, those groups were well represented in the organization, but we hadn't done things, reach out to high school coverage like Kermit Womack. We didn't have those type people in the organization that are Hall of Famers. So last year I went to Jonesboro and we inducted 2 members there, and then in the fall we're going to induct 2 members from Texarkana. And I didn't think it was kind of silly to make them bring all their families here when we could go to Texarkana and honor them there. But it's, let's see, you're going to have to help me. James Williams, Louis Avery, Johnny Green. And they're legends in Texarkana in that East Texas, Southwest Arkansas corridor. You mentioned those names, and I think I can see all their faces. They would come to Razorback games. Yep. So, yeah, Matt. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Clay. So like Clay mentioned, you know, one of the things that we want to do is we don't want this just to be it's so easy to, everybody knows Clay Henry. Covered the Razorbacks. You've read him many times. We don't want it to just become a Razorback Media Hall of Fame. We want to recognize people from all over Arkansas, and I think we've got a really neat group of people here today. Our Sportscaster Hall of Fame is Kermit Womack from Rogers. Appreciate you being here. We've got Jim Borden here, who is going to receive our Mike Harrison Excellence Award, and then Leland Barclay from Fort Smith is here for our SportsWriter Hall of Fame. Before we get going, I do want to mention who our past Hall of Fame members are. Clay, also, you're going to kick yourself. You forgot to mention Harry King is also on our Hall of Fame committee. Harry will be calling Clay this afternoon to let him know about that. As of last check, yes. Our sportscasters who have been inducted into the Hall of Fame in the past before this year: Chuck Barrett, this is in alphabetical order, Frank Broyles, Bud Campbell, Dick Clay, Dizzy Dean, Paul Eels, Jim Elder, Mike Harrison, Mike Irwin, Keith Jackson, Charlie Jones, George Kell, Mike Nail, Rex Nelson, Steve Sullivan, Pat Summerall, Terry Wallace, and Dave Woodman. Our sports writers who have been inducted in the past: Clay mentioned Nate Allen, Jim Bailey, Charlie Cromwell from Jonesboro, Grant Hall last year, Wally Hall, Clay Henry is in here, Orville Henry, Bob Holt, who sadly can't be with us. He passed away in the last year. Harry King, David McCollum, Jerry McConnell, Joe McGee, Wadey Moore, Joe Mosby, Chris Mortensen, George Schroeder, Donna Lampkin-Stevens, and Bob Weisner. Those are our Hall of Famers who have been inducted in the past. So we start today with our Sportscaster Hall of Fame, and it's Kermit Womack from Rogers. And I'll tell you a quick... I'll just tell you a quick story. Way too late in my life, I discovered this little gem of a radio station in Rogers, KURM, KURM, AM and FM. And I found it because I was listening to St. Louis Cardinals games. And so I would listen to the Cardinals games at night, and then I'd get in my truck in the next morning, and then there's this man on there, and he's able to articulate, and he's so knowledgeable and speak authoritatively about current events. And it was a show called The Party Line, and it was with Kermit, who they all called the Colonel. And you could tell everyone who called in and spoke to him or spoke about him or spoke with him had such a reverence for this man. And KURM reminded me of the newspaper from where I'm from. I grew up in Waldron, about 2 hours south of here, and we had the Waldron News. And at the Waldron News, your sports or your reporter, you didn't have a sports reporter, you had a reporter. The reporter, they might be at the city council meeting one night, and the school board meeting the next night, and the high school football game on Friday, and they're doing spot news when they can. And this is what KURM was. They were a community radio station, one of the last community radio stations in the country, and they did such a wonderful job there. Kermit had a 70-year radio career, and he retired last year. KURM shut its doors with his retirement, and as part of that radio career, in addition to everything he did for the city of Rogers and the surrounding area, sports. Rogers. He was their play-by-play man for over 30 years. He was the play-by-play announcer before that at Russellville, I believe, for a number of years, and even Moberly Community College in Missouri. He called a couple of JUCO basketball national championships in the 1960s for that community college. And so we first have got a video that comes from Marty Barnes. Marty Barnes was the basketball coach at Rogers High School. Before that, was a basketball coach in Russellville, and this is what he had to say.
And the Arkansas River Valley had strong effects on the youth and sports programs as well as the entire community. Most deserving award, Kermit. Very proud to be associated with you all these years. Thank you.
And now to speak about Kermit is his son. He is our United States Representative from the 3rd Congressional District of Arkansas, Congressman Steve Womack. Will you welcome him?
Thank you, Matt, and what a great honor it is to be with this group here today. Before I make my remarks about my father and the honoree that we single out here as a sports broadcaster today, I will acknowledge in the audience today is my offensive backfield coach, Lewis Ray, a Rogers native, but has spent a long time still in Russellville. And when I moved there in 1973, he became my backfield coach, and it's a great honor to have Coach up here today and to thank you for being here. My best friend Gary Head over here that wouldn't miss this opportunity to get a free meal and help honor the Colonel here today. And to the committee, thank you, Rusty, and to all of you. Just a tremendous honor. And I know Dad will have something to say about that when he speaks here momentarily. But I'm here today to speak on behalf of this guy I call Dad, one of Arkansas's most successful and impactful broadcasters, Kermit Womack. This I can tell you. Dad does not covet this kind of recognition. It's not who he is. He would tell you straight up that anything he's ever been able to accomplish has been through those who impacted his life early on. And a lot of you don't know much about his upbringing, but I've been there. Little ranger community outside of Danville, Arkansas. And it was because of the likes of guys like a guy like Boss Mitchell and a lady named Catherine Keithley of Danville, both of whom took an active interest in this farm boy from the ranger community and helped him find a way to public speaking, of all things, in the FFA, which allowed him to compete in public speaking and eventually winning a 3-state speaking contest and then launching, thanks to a scholarship given by Arkansas Tech, a 70-plus year broadcasting career. He is self-made. And he would tell you also that the coaches and the players that he's been around in his career, including names like Cotton Fitzsimmons and Charlie Spoonhour, hundreds of high school coaches, one of whom you just heard from, Marty Barnes, that had weekly shows on his stations and also became part of his definition. Dad had a great voice, still does, you'll hear it. He knew his sports, and as Coach Ray would tell you, he was not afraid to share with you after Friday night the good plays and those that were not so successful, right, Coach? Dad had a unique ability to describe action as it unfolded in such a way that those who tuned in could see it through his words. His play-by-play talent allowed him to always be a split second ahead of the crowd reaction. And those of you that listen a lot to radio sports can understand how important it is to be able to describe a touchdown or a three-point shot, even a home run, before the crowd tells you about it. And though it's been well over 50 years ago, people around a small community in north central Missouri, Moberly, still recall those famous trips to the national tournament in Hutchinson, Kansas, year after year, where the Greyhounds, the team that my father became the voice of, the Greyhounds of Fitzsimmons, won back-to-back national championships in 1966 and in 1967. His call of those title games were produced on phonograph records for their memories. And I should say, because my dad will remind you, that Moberly hasn't won a national championship since then. And while Dad did his share of sports broadcasting, his biggest thrill was providing coverage to local high school athletics, boys and girls. He gave them the same treatment. It is safe to say that no other operation, no other station owner was more committed to kids and programs in his listening area than Kermit. And in Northwest Arkansas, in the nearly 45 years of KURM's existence, it also included the states of Oklahoma and Missouri. Takeaways I'll always remember: his signature sign-off, win, lose, or draw, always be a good sport about it. And his insistence to all of us that worked for him that when you complete a game and you invite the stars of that game, no matter what team they played for, the home team or otherwise, you bring those stars up to the booth and you interview them. And your job interviewing them was never complete until you ask those kids to name their parents. In a small way, I think Dad kind of felt a sense of pride in those kids just as much as the parents did. Obviously, Kermit stations were a lot more than sports. It has involved our youth, 4-H, FFA, the bands and choirs, DECA, dozens of other character building and leadership organizations. They all found a home on a Kermit Womack-led station. Dad has been enshrined in the Arkansas Broadcasters Hall of Fame. This past year, the Moberly Greyhound Hall of Fame, and now the Sportswriters and Sports Broadcasters Hall of Fame. There truly isn't a more deserving person. And in about 45 days, he will celebrate his 91st birthday. And I'm proud to stand here today to help honor this outstanding broadcaster, my father, Kermit Womack. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to bring up Kermit Womack, our 2025 Arkansas Sportscasters and Sportswriters Hall of Fame Sportscaster recipient. Will you welcome him?
Thank you. You may be seated. Well, this is a great honor, and as I have said on previous occasions, more than I deserve, and I really feel that way. I want to take just a moment to introduce some people that are very special to me, and back at one of the tables here is Jeremy Grotz and his wife Vicki and Gary from the radio station staff, and I'm honored that you came here today to attend. I want to acknowledge a couple of people from Russellville that drove up. Johnny Story and his wife are here, and I'll tell you that I remember hiring Johnny Story in his first radio job at Russellville many, many years ago, and he has gone on to become, I believe, the most respected and popular radio personality in Russellville in the last 50 years. He is a tremendous individual. And also Lewis Ray is here, as Steve mentioned earlier, his former high school coach. And I'll tell you, Lewis's wife's mother was one of my elementary teachers at Danville High School many years ago, back in the 40s. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate all of the writers who are here today, the sports writers, and I want you to know that I enjoy your articles. I keep up with what you're writing about. It enables us to know a little bit more about high school and college athletics. And I appreciate the opportunity to see some of you here today. I want to spend a couple of minutes to acknowledge the help that I have received along the way. If you can imagine, when I graduated from high school in 1952, we still had no running water on our farmhouse. We cooked with wood and we heated with wood. We had no indoor toilet. We had no car. I studied with a kerosene lamp. So when you have, as Donald Trump would say, your family doesn't have the cards, you realize how fortunate you are to be able to go on to achieve some things in life that you can be proud of. I want to introduce a couple of people here. My wife, Diane, who has been keenly responsible for many of my accomplishments. Without her, I could not have done all the things that I did. My son, Steve, who, as you know, is our representative in Congress. If you have issues, you can grab him after the program today and hopefully finish before the day is out. My daughter, Margaret, who is a great athlete. She is the assistant principal at Springdale High School, and I'm very proud that she was at Harbor High School. Okay, sorry about that. In the Springdale school system. And Margaret was a high school star at Russellville and at Rogers, and went on to become a college basketball All-American at Missouri Southern, where she broke the school scoring record. She is a young lady that I'm very proud of. As I say, the accomplishments that I've been able to enjoy would not have been possible had it not been for, as Steve mentioned, people like Catherine Gately, who was my fifth grade teacher. I remember her having me stay all night when I was involved in school plays. Catherine Keithley and her husband, who would take me home after programs at Danville High School so that I could enjoy participation. Boss Mitchell, who carried me all over the country at these public speaking contests in Arkansas, Tennessee, and Mississippi. Those people were extremely important to me, and it just goes to show how important that elementary school teachers are in the development of these young kids today. So any time that we can, shall we say, support our public school teachers, it's important to do so because they are shaping lives out here. Now, in my 72 years of broadcasting, I have been privileged to meet a lot of coaches. We mentioned earlier Mike Harrison, and I've got to tell you that I remember the morning that he called me. He had been over to Miami, Oklahoma to do a broadcast. He lost his wallet, and he called me from a local service station in Rogers and told me that he was in a bad way without any money. So I went over and filled up his car with gasoline, gave him and the guy with him $20 to go eat breakfast. And I said, Mike, I'm just glad to help you. And he and I had a great relationship down through the years. I carried many of his programs, et cetera. So I can tell you that Mike Harrison was a friend of mine. over the years, we developed a program called Dream Team Banquet, and for 44 years, we ran that at Rogers, and I would say that over 4,000 student athletes were honored during that time, some of whom, of course, went on to play college sports. We have a couple that continue to play in the National Football League and the NBA at this time that were honored at our banquet. Doug McMillan, CEO of Walmart, was one of our student athletes that we honored at our Dream Team banquet. So we enjoyed putting that program on. I want to tell you that one of the things that happened in my early life that influenced me and some of the things that I did later on that were very meaningful to me was in 1955 when I was a ROTC cadet at summer camp in Fort Hood, Texas. A group of us cadets went into the theater on a Sunday afternoon, and in that group was a young black cadet from Penn State University. He and I walked up to the ticket booth, and I plucked down 50 cents for my ticket. The girl gave me my ticket. He put down 50 cents, and she looked at him, and she said, "I'm sorry, we don't allow colored people in our theater." That really offended me, and I said to her, if he's not welcome, I don't want to be here. And so she gave me my money back, and we went on our way. Later on, after college at Arkansas Tech, where I had received a scholarship from J.W. Hull, I went to Higginsville, Missouri to live and work at a radio station in Lexington. One of the first things that I noticed there at our high school was a young black player who was a ninth grader, weighed 199 pounds, and could outrun everybody on the team. And I started tutoring this young man, putting him on my radio show every day, not every day, but occasionally. And the landlord that I rented from said to me one day, he said, "Kermit, why are you wasting so much of your time on that young man?" And he used a derogatory term. And I said, "Doc, this guy has the talent to someday play in the National Football League." And he laughed at me, and he said, "He will never go to college, and he'll be lucky to get out of high school." This young man continued to grow and develop, and by the time he was a senior, he had the size of Derrick Henry, weighed 252 pounds, played middle guard on defense, and was a fullback. And we had some great players with him. In fact, we had 5 players that went on to play major university football. We had a couple of kids that were interested in coming to Arkansas. So the minister and I, along with the coach, came down to see Frank Broyles, who had just taken the job at Arkansas. And he looked at the film. These two backfield kids were interested, the quarterback and the halfback, in coming to Arkansas. So we met with Frank after the SMU game, and he said something to me that I never will forget. He said, "As you know, we're not integrated here at this time. We have no black players." And he said, "We don't feel that these backfield kids are quick enough to play in the Southwest Conference. But if we could say that this fullback is a Mexican, we could name him Romano Seals, and we'd give him a scholarship in a heartbeat." 4 years later, Missouri is playing Arkansas at Little Rock, and George Seals broke through, tackled Bill Gray, knocked him out of the ball game, and Arkansas was upset by Missouri 7-6. I sent Frank a note, and I said, "Do you remember Romano?" George Seals went on to play in the National Football League for a long time, with the Chicago Bears. In fact, he sent me some players later on as I began to recruit players for Moberly. I want to tell you one other thing. We had won 2 national championships at Moberly, and 3 of our players were being recruited by Missouri. And I remember the day that Don Farrow called me and he said, "We're trying to recruit these players, and I wonder if you'd be able to go with me, to take them out for dinner tonight." And I said, "Yeah, we would." So we went up to Macon, Missouri, and they were recruiting Larry Pyrek, Jim Chapman, and one other player, Tom Thanen. After the dinner meeting, I said to Don Farrow, "The best player we've got on the team is this kid, Tom Johnson." And he said, "Well, I'll tell Bob," that's Bob Vanetta, the coach, "I'll tell him." Bob called me and he said, "Look," he said, "we're taking 3. And he said, "Those are the ones we want." I said, "Bob, this is the best player we have." He said, "Well, we're just not able to do that." So several conversations that summer went on like that, and school started. School was about to start, and Bob Vanetta called me one day and he said, "Hey, I've decided to take a chance on your boy, Tom Johnson." I said, "Okay, you'll not be disappointed." One of the first games that season was Missouri playing Arkansas over at Brewer Fieldhouse in Missouri. And I went down to the game, and Arkansas jumped out to a lead, everything going pretty well, and then Tom Johnson came in to the ball game, hit a shot, got the crowd into it. Missouri rallied, beat Arkansas. And I remember going down on the floor after the game, and Bob Chain, some of you may remember Bob, the play-by-play guy for Arkansas, was standing there, and he said, he said, "We had them right where we wanted them until that Johnson kid came in and just turned things around." Later on, Tom Johnson had a big game against Kansas, and when he died not too long ago, I remember Norm Stewart writing in the paper, was quoted as saying, "The thing I remember most about Tom Johnson is him hitting 2 free throws after regulation time had expired to defeat Kansas." How do you think I felt knowing that in all likelihood Tom Johnson would not even have been at Missouri had it not been for the meeting that I had with Don Farrow? I'll tell you one more story. I began recruiting basketball players out of Savannah, Georgia. I had a brother who was in the Radio Hall of Fame in Georgia, and he didn't know anything about sports, but he was a living legend in Savannah. And when the families found out I was his brother, they couldn't be more helpful. So out of that relationship there, I was able to get kids out of Charleston, South Carolina, and I had 4 players from Charleston that I recruited. I had 3 players from Savannah that we recruited. These guys scored a total of 5,900 points and grabbed 3,600 rebounds at Moberly Junior College. One of those players, the second player from this high school in Savannah that I recruited, his freshman year, I went to work one morning and his coach was on the phone. He said, "You guys will never get another one of our players because you've got a coach up there that can't control these players, and this kid has been kicked out of school." His mother was on the phone with me crying, said he's all she's got left in the world. Now his education is down the tube. And I said, "Russell, I fully support the college and its discipline, but I'll try to help him get another school." So I went out to the college and I said to the assistant dean, "What would it cost me to pay his tuition for the rest of this semester so that he could transfer to another school?" And he let me know they didn't want to do that. So I called Missouri Western and I talked to Gary Filbert, who later on became an assistant at Missouri. And I said, would you be interested in making arrangements to get Larry Rivers in school? And he said, yeah, I would. And I've got an automobile dealer that'll give him a job. So he goes to Missouri Western. I called the coach and I said, look, things have been straightened out, and I thought I'd done my job. However, 2 weeks later, I went out to the college, and the history teacher walked up to me, and he said, you know, Kermit, the only thing wrong with that victory we had the other night over Vincennes was that your buddy Gator Rivers wasn't here to see how well we did without him. And I won't get into the details, but that started a conversation. He went into the dean, told him what I said. The dean called my boss and demanded that I be fired. It spilled over into the community the following season, and to make a long story short, it ended up in the coach getting fired, the dean getting fired, and they hired Charlie Spoonhour. Later on, Rivers was picked up by the Harlem Globetrotters, and I remember an occasion later on when I was on an airplane flight to Topeka, Kansas, and the Globetrotters were on the plane. Larry Rivers came up and sat by me, and here's what he said. He said, you know, Kermit, I have to pinch myself every day to realize that it's true. He said, I've played before the Queen of England, I've played before the President, and he said, if you had not intervened on my behalf, I would have been back on the streets of Savannah. He said, I'll never be able to repay you. And I said, Larry, you repay me just knowing that you've been successful. Later on, Larry Rivers, through his influence, got this coach who had called me, his high school coach. They hired him as coach of the Globetrotters, and when they played in Fayetteville, Russell Ellington called me and he said, I've got tickets for you behind the bench. He took me back into the locker room, introduced me to his players. How do you think I feel in knowing that I may have been instrumental in the success of a Harlem Globetrotter? And when I was sitting at home not too long ago, and the ESPN ran a trailer saying Gator Rivers, Globetrotter, and commissioner, because he'd been elected to an office in Savannah, has died. Those are the paybacks that have meant so much to me over the years, and all of that has been possible through my sports play-by-play and the 72 years in the broadcast business. I'll mention one more thing. Steve, you saw him earlier. One of the things that I was most proud of is the military service of my family. We have 193 years of cumulative service to the military. I had 35 years, retired as the Inspector General of the Arkansas National Guard. Steve had 30 years. He retired as a colonel. I have a son who graduated from West Point. And in 1977, when I attended his graduation at West Point, and I administered the oath of office to him in Pershing Hall, little did I realize then that my other son someday would be the chairman of the board of visitors at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. So I come to you here this morning with a thankful heart. Thanks for this great honor, and I am very, very fortunate to have been able to enjoy what we call the American dream in our society today. And I wish the very best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Next up, Leland Barclay. Leland has been a sports writer in Fort Smith for more than 40 years. And I'll tell you a quick story about Leland. 6 years ago, we put together a photo book here through the Democrat Gazette, and it was a high school, a history of Arkansas high school football. And one of the first people I was told to contact was Leland Barclay. And it was one thing that Leland did was that you opened up my eyes to a number of stories in Arkansas that I did not know. One of the things that he was working on at that time was that he told me he was trying to compile a list of all of the state champions for the all-black high schools during the days that the schools, or before the days that the schools were integrated. And I learned about these teams like Little Rock Dunbar and Pine Bluff Merrill. These were teams that were national champions of the black school footballs in the 1920s, 1930s. A school like St. Anne's Academy, that was not a black school, but it was a private school in Fort Smith that was affiliated with the Catholic Church there, and it was a football powerhouse in the 1960s. Players like Martine Bircher, who was an All-American at Arkansas, came out of St. Anne's Academy, and many, many other stories that Leland has taught not only me, but the readers of the Times Record, the River Valley Democrat Gazette, Barclay's Almanac of Arkansas Football. It's something that anybody who covers Arkansas football, they get this. It's like our version of Dave Campbell's magazine, maybe, in Texas. It's got a ton of records and all-state players, and Leland does a great job of archiving Arkansas high school football. We've got a video to play here. This is Rick Jones, the former head coach at Greenwood High School.
Leland, congratulations on being named to the Arkansas Sportscasters and Sportswriters Hall of Fame. I'm really happy for you. I don't know why it took so long. In my opinion, you're one of the best. I really appreciate the fact that you brought true passion to what you did. It was obvious the first time I met you when you came in to interview us there at Greenwood, is that you were passionate about what you did. You truly cared about what you did, and I appreciate that so much, because that's sort of the way that's sort of the way coaches are. We're passionate about what we do, but I could see that in you, and also knew that you wanted to be fair, and I appreciate that, because the guys that have the pen have the last word, and you were always fair to us, and you were always fair to the kids, and you were never critical of our kids, and that is something that is very, very important in my opinion. But I just really appreciate the passion that you have for your job, and I appreciate how you approached it, and really, really have great respect for you. And you obviously loved what you did, and I also appreciate the fact that you were probably the only sports writer around, not probably, but you actually are the only sports writer around that can wear his 100% Bulldog shirt with confidence, because you came to every single day of Fast Dogs back in the day. But I appreciate that. I appreciate your involvement, and congratulations. It's a great honor, and I know that you fought the temptation to be an Alma homer all those years, and I appreciate the fact that you stood strong for the Bulldogs when it counted. Best of luck to you, and congratulations again.
To tell us a little bit more about Leland, will you welcome Graham Thomas? He's the sports editor of the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette.
Thank you, Matt. As Matt said, I'm Graham Thomas with the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and also the River Valley Democrat Gazette, which we're going to talk a little bit about here in just a little bit. I am really, truly honored and blessed to be able to speak about my friend and colleague, Leland Barclay. There's a lot of sports writers in the room here today, a lot of people that have worked with Leland, and a lot of the people that are here that are under that category would be even much more qualified than me to speak about Leland. I'm looking at Buck Ringgold and Kevin Taylor back there on the back row. I mean, you know, Kevin was just telling me about when he moved to Arkansas in 1999, him and Walter Woody and Leland driving around and showing him the places and hearing all the stories. Just unbelievable. And I'm happy to share a few things about Leland. a little more than 2 years ago, I accepted the sports editor job for the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. And with that job came the duties of being the sports editor of the newly created River Valley Democrat-Gazette. And part of that job, including getting to interact with Leland Barclay on almost a daily basis. And I've known Leland a long time. I haven't known him this well as long, but as sports writers, our paths crossed, a few times over the years. We would see each other at different events. Sometimes it would be up in Northwest Arkansas. Sometimes it was me down in the River Valley. But I always felt really fortunate if I was covering a game that Leland was at. One, that meant it was a pretty important game. So if Leland was there, it was a pretty big deal. But and whether that was at Van Buren or Greenwood, at Alma even, right, Leland? It was always a real treat to be able to cover a game with him. If I had a statistical question or anything historical, he was right there. He wasn't getting a text message or an email from me trying to figure out how to correctly stat a, hook and lateral play or something like that, which I still, to this day, have to call him every now and then, and I'm like, Leland, how do you do this? What is the correct way to properly account for all this? He's always got an answer for me. Those interactions, though, really pale in comparison to what the last 2 years have been like working with Leland on the River Valley Democrat-Gazette, which started as a weekly product coming out on Sundays. Now we have a daily edition that we provide content for every day down the River Valley. Leland and I talk almost every day. Some days it may just be a little bit. Some days it might be a lot of bit. I'm sure he gets sick of me and hearing from me and hearing my thoughts and suggestions, but let me tell you, I don't get sick of hearing from him. He is truly a blessing to work with. Leland loves high school sports like no one I have ever met. He is the guy that he did this last fall. He's the guy that will travel to Melissa, Texas on a Saturday morning in August to cover Little Rock Parkview, a team that's not in our coverage area up here or in the River Valley. Just, it's Little Rock Parkview, a really good football team in our state. He went all the way to Melissa, Texas to go cover their football game down there. And to me, that just kind of showed his dedication, his passion to what he does. And that's not the first time he's ever done something like that. If there was a game that interested him that was on the other side of the state, he would tell our friends in Little Rock and say, hey, I'm going over there to cover this, and they would take his story. And I have to say that he very much loves covering high school football. He covers a lot of different sports, and we've added to some of those sports over the last couple of years, which we're learning about. But high school football, I have to say, is what he does best. And as I said, he'll go from one end of the state to the other during the state playoffs. It seems like a couple of years ago, he told me that he was going to start his day in Searcy covering Alma basketball and then make his way back over to North Little Rock by the end of the night to cover Fort Smith Northside. And it seems like he might have hit, a couple along the way as well. Or like this past fall, I think you went to 3 different state volleyball tournaments all on the same day, all in the River Valley. And you were, you might have been covering one game and shooting photos at another, and then just hitting up the hospitality room at the end in Van Buren or something. So Leland is the guy who makes the annual trip every spring to Lake Hamilton for the state weightlifting tournament. The only person in the state who does this. Leland Barclay does it. And weightlifting, that's a sport he's very passionate about, and we're happy to run those stories. I've always believed stats are so important to our coverage, but Leland's passion for stats goes to another level. There's not a box score he doesn't like. And he reminds me with our football writers, it's important that he get all the stats from the previous Friday night games. And I have to tell each and every one of them, it's very important that we get these stats. I've had the privilege to travel with Leland on a number of different trips and spend a lot of time hashing out plans, ideas, and future stories. Heck, just this past spring, Leland and I were stuck in his SUV in the Shock Stadium softball stadium parking lot in Conway, waiting out a deluge rainstorm to cover high school state softball finals. When we made our way over to David's Burgers for lunch, it was no surprise that we were flagged down by members of the AAA, including former ASU head coach Steve Roberts. They were just there wanting to talk to Leland. Are there any history buffs in the room? I bet there are, Rusty. Well, and Matt kind of alluded to this, but you guys need to know about what I would say is Leland's greatest work. So this right here is the Almanac of Arkansas high school football. So this is the 2022 edition. I'm a couple of years behind, I guess. But Leland put this together, and it's a labor of love on his part. I think a lot of it he did while he was, working his real job, so to speak, which he retired from recently. But I've got my copy with me, and it's something that we pull out all the time to make sure that we're trying to find something. And I pulled it out the other day. I wasn't able to find it because it wasn't in the room I was in. But anyway, it is just a very valuable piece of work that, like Matt said, sports writers across the state use on a daily basis. But even more than that, Leland loves high school sports in the River Valley, covering the Fort Smith area, the surrounding cities in Arkansas and in Oklahoma. If you really want to see what Leland is about, a big treat is watching him make the rounds at our local media days with coaches and kids. Or cover a game with him and watch as the coaches, players, parents, fans, they all come to him and got to say hello and check in with him. He is truly a legend in our sports writing community and without a doubt a Hall of Famer. When I heard he was receiving this honor today, I couldn't help but smile, as no one I know is more deserving than he is. So congrats to Leland on a great sports writing career. It's not over. We got a lot of work to do, and I hope we have a long ways to go working together covering prep sports in our community.
All right, thank you, Graham. Will you please welcome Leland Barclay, the latest sports writer to the Arkansas Sportscasters and Sportswriters Hall of Fame.
This is really very overwhelming to me. I kind of feel like the two-hole hitter in a lineup in between Lou Brock and Ken Griffey Jr. My job is really just don't hit into a double play. And to use another, sports analogy, it's just it's great to be very humbling to be added to the roster of the names that you mentioned earlier. Just very humbling, very grateful to the committee. And especially being honored today with Mr. Womack and Mr. Borden, two legends as well. Like a lot of guys my age, I grew up wanting to be a Major League Baseball player, but God didn't give me the ability to hit a curveball 400 feet or to throw a fastball 98 miles an hour. Instead, he gave me a much greater talent, and that was to write. And so for the last 42 years, I've been able to go to ball games, get in free, sometimes get free food in the hospitality room or the press box, have the best seat in the house, talk to coaches and players, and then write a story and get paid for it. I mean, how great is that? I used to love watching Hall of Fame induction ceremonies, all the Major League players and NBA players, and one of the things that I thought was always boring is all they wanted to do was get up and thank people. And I wanted to hear stories about their games they played and the big hits they had and what the locker room was like. And while I was kind of preparing for this, I thought there's a reason why they thank people. Because there's a lot of people involved in people's success. First of all, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for giving me the ability to write. And then I grew up in a great home, a very loving home with a mom and dad, Christian home. I never saw my parents get in a fight or even a disagreement. We had home-cooked meals. My dad was a World War II veteran. My mom was a Sunday school teacher, and it was just, a great home. I never heard a cuss word in my house. There was never a drop of alcohol in our house. It was just, a great, very blessed to be brought up by them. And then, of course, the teachers that I had at school, English teacher Grace Barlow, journalism teachers, Bill Ferris and Mary Maud Gallagher. And how about proofreaders? How thankful am I to proofreaders? Talk about unsung heroes. They're the ones that I don't even know how many mistakes they've caught of mine. And some great sports editors through the years. Of course, Chip Souza, who not only hired me once, but hired me twice to come write sports for him, and has afforded me many, many opportunities through the years. 1983, I had a real job, and I've had one for a long time, or until I retired about 3 years ago. But 1983, I saw this little ad in the Press Argus paper in Van Buren needing a part-time sports writer, and I thought, well, that might be fun. And so I went down, talked to John Cooper. The next Friday night, I was in a press box covering a high school football game, and have been every game since. He was also the one that kind of gave me the idea. I started putting together a lot of notes because the historical aspect was really very interesting to me. And I saw kind of a void there because I wanted to hear about or know, if a team won 8 straight games, was this the longest winning streak they'd had in 5 years, 8 years, 10 years? How many straight playoff appearances teams had had? So I started putting some notes together, and he was the one that said, you need to write a book. So in 1993, I put the first one out. And of course, Chip through the years, just amazing. Graham Thomas the last 2 years. But a big thank you to Brent Powers, the president of the Northwest Arkansas Media, who saw a void a few years ago about the local coverage in the Fort Smith area because the local newspaper had been bought out by a big chain, and they had just gutted it. And he saw a void, not only saw a void, but acted on it. And now the River Valley Democrat-Gazette is a fully staffed newspaper with an office in downtown Fort Smith, looking to add another photographer. And if there's ever a guy that is going to get 25 hours out of a 24-hour day, it's going to be Brent Powers. I know he's working on it right now. And of course, I have to thank, my lovely wife, Jennifer, who not only just tolerates my love for sports, but even understands it. One of the things I used to do when I was a kid growing up, I took my lawn mowing money and I bought, of course, a lot of baseball cards, football cards. I also bought subscriptions to the Sporting News, Baseball Digest, and Sports Illustrated. And she'll tell you that I still have all of those. We can only park one car in the garage, but I have all of those. And then, of course, my son Brennan, who has been a constant companion to me the last 30 years on all these road trips. The first game he went, 31. I hate to get that statistic wrong. His first game, he was a week and a half old, and he was in a press box. His first big road trip, he was 5 weeks old. It was on Thanksgiving, the Friday after Thanksgiving. He was born during football season, but he was born during the middle of the week, so he knew not to mess up the schedule. And so that 5 weeks later, he was on a major road trip, semifinals of the state playoffs to Monticello, Arkansas, a cold, wet, nasty night. Now he'll tell you, if you ask him, he'll probably tell you he remembers those games. I don't think he really does, but maybe he does. And since then, we've been to Texarkana, El Dorado, Barton, Wynn, Jonesboro. Has anybody heard of Lynn, Arkansas? Covered a basketball tournament there. So he's been to all those places with me through the years, and all points in between. And I know that one of the things we talked about, the box scores and stats. I think it was Dan Shaughnessy, a great writer for the Boston Globe, once said that the box score is one of 4 major food groups. And then also Jerome Holtzman of the Chicago Sun wrote the book, No Cheering in the Press Box. I read all those guys growing up, those legendary sports writers that wrote for the Sporting News and Baseball Digest and just all of that. Last week, just to show the local coverage and what the River Valley Democrat Gazette has done, last week we had our River Valley Democrat Gazette Football Media Day in Fort Smith, and it was represented by 11 people associated with the River Valley Democrat Gazette. Kevin Taylor was there, Walter Woody, Harold McIlvain, Henry Apple, Graham Thomas. Spencer had his whole crew there, Sydney and Diana and Faith. Hank Layton has been so vital to everything we've done there, and all of those people have just been great and fantastic. And as I'm very humbled by this, but also very grateful. But I'm also reminded of a poem. I'm not into poetry. Maybe other than Miney Casey gets struck out. But there's a poem, God's Hall of Fame. And I'm not going to read it today, but basically what it says is that earthly fame is fleeting. My ultimate goal someday is to stand before the Lord, for Him to look at me and know me and say, well done, my good and faithful servant. Thank you.
All right, and finally, Clay mentioned this earlier, we've got the Mike Harrison Award for Excellence in Sports Media, and that's going to go to Jim Borden. Jim Borden is here with us today. Jim is for the people who are in his field, and we've got some here, Blair Cartwright, Dale Carpenter, Larry Foley, who are in this field. He's a legend in the state of Arkansas, one of the great archivists of video here in our state. And he's one of those that you may have not seen his face, but you almost certainly have seen his work through different documentaries, sports films, coaches shows, live broadcasts of Razorback basketball games. And we've got a video here from one of the many people who Jim has tutored over the years. This is from Trey Marley, who works with Fayetteville Public Schools.
I first met Jim Borden when he hired me at the University of Arkansas Media Services Department in the late 1980s. That was back in the days when capturing video meant lugging around a 30-pound, 3/4-inch tape deck attached to a 25-pound camera. I carried the deck, and eventually Jim gave me the opportunity to carry the camera. That job became a classroom. Jim gave so many people that opportunity, the opportunity to frame it up, to get the shot. In the mid-1990s, he was ahead of the curve by being an early adopter of digital video editing, and again, he shared his knowledge and access to those tools as well. Jim was always busy with a wide range of projects, from supporting live event production at the U of A, to co-producing documentaries with Larry Foley and Bob Cochran, capturing the latest Razorback sports season, or working on special projects for Frank Broyles. For video production, Jim was the go-to guy. Jim opened the door for many people to be involved in the early days of the Arkansas Razorback Sports Network and the crew that made it all happen. He was a cornerstone of that rock star team of broadcast professionals. ARSN would always have these early season Razorback basketball game packages that included a game right around Christmas. For those games, Jim and his fantastic wife, Peggy, would always cater breakfast for the whole crew. Those were special times. Jim started out as my boss, he became my mentor, and now I'm proud to call him my friend. Jim, on behalf of myself and the many others you've lifted up, opened doors for, and inspired along the way, thank you. Your generosity and mentorship ripples through our community. Congratulations on this well-deserved recognition.
Now Clay Henry is going to come back up and tell us a little bit more about Jim.
So these are personal stories. If you needed anything on the history that's on video of the Razorbacks, and if you're doing Hogs Illustrated, that was me. He was the go-to, and Peggy. If I needed something, it could be done like that. You'd go in his office and you would just see just canisters and canisters and film and computers, equipment that no one else in Arkansas had at that time. I'm talking about 1992, 93, 94. No one was doing any of that work, and he was ahead of the curve on everything. My father died, I guess it was 02, 03, and he said, would you come by my office? So I went by there, and he handed me CDs and had names of my daughters on the CDs, one for me and two for our daughters. And it was highlights of things my dad had done through the years. It could be interviews that he had done with Coach Broyles or different people. He's like, I just think you guys would want this. Those are the kind of things that he did for us in the media. So when we thought of this award, our committee, we had a long list. It's easy to find somebody that's deserving on this kind of an honor. I mean, it could be, and we'll have fun going forward, but it was unanimous in our committee that the first one would be Mr. Borden. And I have to say Mr. because just out of the respect that I have for your work. And I'm going to introduce Larry Foley that it's going to do the real presentation, but I asked to talk today. So if y'all will welcome Larry Foley.
I have known Jim Borden, and I turned 71 yesterday, so I had to add this up, for 45 years. Amazing. And I'm here today. Jim is rather shy, always has been, and Peggy and I talked. I'm here to accept the award as a member of the family on his behalf. I met Jim when he was at KATV, and he and Philip Bruce ran the Fayetteville Bureau. And if you're in the Fayetteville Bureau, you're going to cover Razorback sports, and that's what Jim loved. He had been a walk-on for the Razorbacks out of Little Rock Catholic High School. And so I met Jim then and worked with him then. Jim had worked with Mike Nail, Hall of Fame inductee. At Channel 7, he worked for Paul Eels, worked with Paul Eels, a Hall of Fame inductee. And over time, I realized if I'm going to do the kind of long-form films, especially the sports films, there's only one guy that you're going to want to work with, and that's Jim Borden. We worked together on films such as 22 Straight, when the Razorbacks ruled the college football world, The First Boys of Spring, the story of baseball spring training that began in Hot Springs. Dale Carpenter edited that. John McDonald, the greatest coach ever, and the Frank Broyles story. He has long been Arkansas's preeminent sports videographer and, as Clay mentioned, archivist. He has been one of those guys that if you wanted to get a hold of something, you really needed to talk to Jim. As Clay mentioned, his archive. I don't know how many tapes, videotapes, and old films that Jim had collected, but it was a bunch. And I think we're all glad, and I don't know how many people know this, is that the University of Arkansas athletic director acquired that library a few years ago, and that is a great blessing to Jim and his family and to the state, because all those things that he collected, they didn't go away. For example, if you needed the 1977 Wanamaker Mile won by Arkansas's Niall O'Shaughnessy of Limerick, Ireland, the play-by-play narrated by Hall of Famer Charlie Jones, and I needed it, Jim had it. If you needed the 1954 Arkansas Ole Miss football game, the first sellout at War Memorial Stadium, and the big play in that game was the Powder River play. The game was 6-0, where Buddy Bob Benson threw a touchdown pass to Preston Carpenter. I needed that film. Jim had it. If you needed Coach Broyles talking about how it went down when Coach Barnhill hired him to be the Razorback football coach, a job that he had longed for. And I don't know how in the world Jim had it, but Jim had it. And Frank is talking to his former players, the A Club, in the press box. Heck, Jim may have shot it. And Frank is telling the story about, Barney, I said, what took you so long? And he said, I needed to get the ducks on the pond. And I said, are the ducks on the pond? And he said, yes, I'll be there tomorrow. Jim had it. But a lot of my stories with Jim Borden, and we have traveled around the state. We flew into Boston and interviewed Lee Montville about Babe Ruth, and we drove from Boston to Cooperstown, New York, and did interviews there, and we drove back from Cooperstown to New York City and did interviews there. They're personal times. Jim has not only been my collaborator, my photographer and sometimes editor, but he's been one of my very best friends. So here's the story. A few years ago, I had been commissioned by Arkansas PBS. Remember PBS, Congressman? Arkansas PBS to do a film called, a little jab there, called, it was about where you can find the best pies in Arkansas. Now that was a tough gig right there, let me tell you. And I had a crew, but one of my photographers, I got a note in the middle, and we had an entire day planned on the road the next day, starting in Fort Smith. I got a note from one of my photographers that said, I'm in the hospital, I've had a health issue, and I can't go. And I'm sitting up in my bed in the middle of the night thinking, what am I going to do? And I sent a text to Jim. It's about 3 a.m. And I said, I don't know what you're doing tomorrow, but if you're up early, I got a job for you. Called me. Might have been 3:10 a.m. and said, what time do you need me? That's Jim Borden. There when you needed him. When Jim and I were working on, and Peggy, when you work with Jim, you work with Peggy. When we were doing 22 Straight, and we're meeting a lot at Jim's office and talking about some of these players that we are going to try to interview. And some of you old Razorback fans will remember the quarterbacking man off the 65 team, John Brittenham. And John had some legal issues, and we didn't really know where he was, and the athletic department didn't know where he was either. But Peggy kept telling us, you guys can't do this story without John Brittenham. So she figured out some member of the family, I don't know, he might have been a football coach at Woodland Junior High. I can't really remember the whole story. Or maybe that was Bobby Crockett, but there was some way that Peggy figured out how to get a hold of him. And so off one Sunday, we traipsed up to Lake of the Ozarks, and I'm guessing we're going to interview John, and we met at a Mexican place there, and John talks with us for a while about what we wanted to do. And he still was a little bit on the fence. And we drove over to his place, beautiful place overlooking the lake. And he told us, he said, "What are you going to talk to me about? Because people don't really know what I've been through. And I don't really want to talk about that." And I said, "John, this is football. We're going to talk about those days in 65 and 66 when you were the quarterbacking man and you were the toast of Arkansas." And he said, "Okay, I'll do it. Thank you, Peggy, because you made that happen." One last story about that shoot, and there have been so many others that we have worked on. When we talked to players that played under Coach Broyles, and one of the things we learned is that they revered him. And we heard a phrase that was a quote from Coach Broyles, that the best player doesn't always win. The best team always wins. Well, let me tell you something. Accepting this award, most deserved for Jim and Peggy Borden. Jim Borden was and is a great player, but he was the very best teammate. Congratulations, Jim and Peggy.